400 students. The content areas that I teach are math, social studies, and on-demand writing. And throughout this presentation, we're going to follow this general outline. We'll focus on my area that I chose to look at, my research question, the plan of action, how I implemented that plan, any results that I have to date, how I plan to continue, and my reflection and future plans for this project. And I chose to do this with my 5th grade students, and they should be popping up here in just a second. That's my group of kids that I chose to do this project with. They are a terrific group of kids. At first, I planned to focus on maybe social studies and writing for this project just because it seemed like project-based learning really leans itself more towards those areas. But I quickly knew that if I wanted to push myself further, that I would need to kind of branch out of my comfort zone. And not only have I considered math always my weakest subject, but my kids tell me that all the time. They always say, I just can't do math. So that's why I wanted to focus more on it. And math is such an important content area these days in any grade level. So I began gearing myself towards a math-based project. And I thought that would just be pushing the envelope just a little bit further, like teachers always want to do. We always want to take it to the next level. So I began with math as my area of focus. And I started thinking, well, what really does my math instruction look like? What are some of my problem areas? And what did I want my math instruction to look like? This is only my 2nd year of teaching, so every moment has been really a learning moment for me. And in college, they tell you in your education classes that you need to do project-based learning. You need to do hands-on, minds-on learning. And I really loved that in college, but when I started in my classroom, it seemed like that just wasn't possible. And so it just didn't seem like my math instruction was looking like how they wanted it to in college. And instead, it was looking more like me just standing in front of the board and me just giving worksheets to my students. And it really didn't look how I wanted it to look. It looked more like this, just here's a worksheet, I'll stand in front of the board and I'll teach you, and then you do some practice problems. And I quickly figured out that's not how I wanted it to be. You know, while students should be assessed continually and they have to apply their learning in some way to standard problems, I just wasn't satisfied with what I was doing as a teacher. And the on-paper lessons and practice problems, they weren't challenging enough for my students. And it didn't seem like the content really stuck with them. So I wanted my math instruction to look differently. I wanted my students to use manipulatives. I wanted them to use technology, and I wanted them to have those hands-on, minds-on learning that would really stick with them through their education. I wanted it to look more like this, with the students working together and having some sort of meaningful experience. So my main research question was, is there a way for students to have a meaningful math experience that's going to carry with them through their education? Or in other words, can I break that cycle of, I'll never use this again in real life? So I wanted to really break away from that. So I decided to develop my plan of action. And I wanted to connect it with some research that I went through. And my plan was to use some relatively fun math topics that students like, and generally I found that that's geometry and measurement data, so I decided to focus in on those standards. And in those large areas, our main points are graphing, identifying and classifying two-dimensional figures, and then calculating volume. I wanted students to take a pre-test before, of course. Thank you. Of course, we always want to know what our students know, so I wanted them to take a pre-test on those standards before I started the unit project. And then I wanted to get them involved in centers and activities. Again, break away from just me standing in front of the board. And some of those activities that we started are geometry walks, where they identify two-dimensional figures and then classify them, and making kind of a portfolio about those, and having picture documentation and classifying those. Graphing rooms, using coordinates to plot where different things are in the room, or maybe their rooms at home, and using their bodies to create different two-dimensional figures and classify those. And then finally, experiments with volume with different containers and see what they think about those. And I wanted to assess the route, and that's what we're going to do. And I want to use Study Island as a good basis for assessment and map, and then introduce the project. Now, my project is to assign students different standards and have them create digital stories or iMovies that teach those standards in a fun way so that they can be shared with other students. And so we ordered some iPad minis and some microphones that students are able to do this with. And then the final step is a social studies connection where students send their digital stories or their iMovies to people in different countries that maybe don't have the resources that we have. And I have a program called Illuminate to do that with. And then once we do that, I plan to figure out how to send that to those other students. I thought that was a really good way to tie in some different content areas and let students have a different awareness of what was going on maybe in other countries. So where we are to date, my curriculum map, we began geometry and measurement data kind of in the late spring, so late March and into April, and that's what we've done so far. We've just started the centers and the activities, and one thing that's made it just a little bit harder is the fact that I had a baby 6 weeks ago, so I've been out for 6 weeks, so my substitute has been implementing a lot of activities and the centers so far. And so because of that, it's been hard to know the results at this point, but what my substitute and I have found so far is that students are so much more engaged when they learn through centers and activities. That's just a given. And they respond much better to the assessments afterwards. And what I mean by that is that students are just much more confident in conveying their learning. They're not as stressed about assessments. I have some students that anytime you put anything down in front of them and say, I'm going to grade this, they get really anxious about that. And so they just perform better in general to these assessments that I've been giving them. Obviously, when I continue, when I go back, I plan to just complete the implementation of these plans. I plan to complete the centers and activities. And one thing I want to do is create a portfolio that students have, that they can look back and see, oh, we did this when we talked about graphing, and we did this when we looked at classifying figures, so that they can see their learning as they go, and so they can talk about what their assessments have and their activities have done for them. And I want to have a survey for students to talk about why activities worked or why they did not, and whether or not they feel confident about each standard that we've looked at. And then I want the students to actually follow through, pick a standard that they feel that they're confident about, create a digital story that, again, will teach that to other people. And I want to give them a lot of freedom with this. Every time I've done technology in this past year, they pleasantly surprise me when I give them a lot of freedom to do what they want to do. So this is going to continue throughout the rest of the year, through kind of our testing window and past that. And then our plan is to send, like I said before, the digital stories overseas. And one kind of problem that I've run into is that the program that I picked, that Illuminate, they're not really sending the stories anymore, so I'm going to have to find a different program to do that. But it's just a hurdle that I have to get through. So as we complete the assessment, the data collected, again, I want to use Study Island and math. And to see how students perform on standards, because ultimately, we do want to make sure they master the content. But then also those student surveys, their responses, to figure out how they liked maybe the change in instruction versus me standing in front of the board all day long and just giving them practice. And then I want opinions on the digital stories and the technology. Was it something that they felt was beneficial? Will it be something that lasts throughout their educational career? Will they remember doing that? And that just goes back to my original purpose, which is to make sure that they have a lasting educational experience they'll carry past kind of school and on into their